It's Pride Month. What better time to talk about how to make your sex ed more queer friendly? Sexuality educator. Before I dive into the video, you know what I'm gonna ask you. If you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up, please share it, and if you are a fan of the channel and you have not subscribed, then why don't you go ahead and subscribe? All right, it is June. That means that it is Pride Month. So as a sex educator, I thought it would be great to share 5 simple ways that you can make your sex ed more queer friendly. These are tips you can use if you are teaching sex ed in school, if you run, a community youth group, or, even a sex ed group or workshop for adults. Queer folk are often left out of sex ed. There is often this sort of general assumption that when we're, teaching people about sex, particularly youth, what we need to talk about is penis and vagina sex and all the things that can come from that. But lots of people don't have that kind of sex because they aren't having sex with people who have those sorts of body parts. Even straight folks don't always have penis and vagina sex. We want to make our comprehensive sex ed as comprehensive as possible, and part of that includes making it as inclusive as possible. So without further ado, here are 5 simple ways that you can make your sex ed more queer friendly. Tip number 1, gender neutralize body parts. The easiest way that I've found to do this is to just entirely separate gender from any discussions that I'm having about sexual anatomy or sexual biology. For example, if I want to talk about testicles, instead of saying, boys or men, I will just say people with testicles, and you can do that for any body part. People with breasts, people with ovaries, people with vulvas, people with uteruses. And whenever possible, I do the same thing with biological processes. So again, instead of saying something like, oh, when girls get their periods, I will just say people who menstruate, or when folks get their periods, or when people ejaculate. Just take the gender out of it, done. Include intersex folks and intersex bodies. While most people have, either penis and testicles or a vulva, there are people who don't have genitalia that could be categorized as either. It's also important and interesting to note, and I did not know this until I was well into my sex education career, that intersex conditions are not only about genitals. Sometimes you will have people born with genitalia that we often describe as ambiguous, but there are actually 5 characteristics that we use to sort of categorize people according to biological sex. So that's their primary sex characteristics, so penis, testicles, vulva, clitoris, all of that. Their gonads, so testicles or ovaries, the sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, the chromosomes, XX, XY, and there can be a lot of variations on that. And the secondary sex characteristics, so those are the physical characteristics that develop during puberty. There can be variations amongst all of those characteristics that do not fit into our traditional understanding of biological sex binary. And so, yeah, talk about those things, don't talk about, genitals or hormones or secondary sex characteristics as though everyone, fits into that, one of those 2 categories, because not everybody does. Also include asexual folks. Everyone is sexual is something that I used to say. That is not, in fact, true, or at least it's not true in terms of everyone experiencing sexual desire, sexual arousal, wanting to have sexual partnerships. Not everybody does. The lack of desire for sex or sexual interactions with other people, or even sexual interactions with your own body, is well within the range of normal human behavior. And so normalizing asexuality, normalizing, things like lower sex drive is one way that we can make our sex ed more inclusive, more queer friendly. go beyond penis and vagina sex. I touched on this in the intro. I think this is, again, something that we as sex educators or people who teach sex ed often miss, particularly in conversations about safer sex. I find that there is a tendency to lump safer sex that is about reducing the risk of sexually transmitted infections and safer sex that's about reducing the risk of unintended pregnancy as all being the same thing, when they are not. When we talk about safer sex products, there tends to be a real tendency to focus on condoms. And again, condoms are great if you are having some kind of penetrative sex involving a penis. A lot of people have sex that does not involve a penis, and there can still be risk of contracting or transmitting an STI. Let's talk about options for people, who are, doing things like grinding and scissoring. Options for cunnilingus, for fingering, for all the kinds of sex that are amazing and fun and feel great, but are not about a penis going into somebody's body. Let's give people, the full complement of options for practicing safer sex, regardless of the body parts involved. Also, let's talk to youth who aren't having penis and vagina sex about the benefits of getting tested for STIs. Again, this is something that I find that is especially lacking for lesbians or people who are having the kind of sex where there's just two vulvas involved. It's like, oh, you can't contract anything because, again, no penis involved. That isn't true. Everyone, any sexual orientation, any gender, STI testing can be really beneficial. Talk to your queer students, your queer workshop attendees, the queer folks that you're teaching about what it is that they need from sex ed, what it is they need from you as a facilitator, as a teacher, as a sex educator. If you're in a classroom situation or you're with youth that you see on a regular basis, you could, let them know that, my door is open if you ever want to come and talk to me about something. You could set up, some kind of suggestion box or an online survey where they can let you know what they need. You can also check out articles or videos made by queer folk about what it is that, they've either lacked in their sex education or what has worked for them in terms of having a more inclusive sex ed experience. And I'm going to include a link below to some pieces written by folks at Planned Parenthood Toronto. They have a whole initiative called Queering Sex Ed, and it's great. And just a couple of bonus tips before I leave you. Most people who have vulvas have ovaries, but not all do. Similarly, most people who have penises also have testes, but not all do. A lot of people feel that their sexuality is more complex than the language and the words we have available to us to talk about it. Some asexual folks, even though they don't personally experience sexual arousal or desire, will have consensual sex for other reasons. In the comments below, give me some of your tips for making sex ed more queer friendly. That's all for now. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you soon. Bye.